all. This is Dr. Mobeen Sayed from drbeen.com. Welcome to one more show. So the last week we discussed a study which showed that in long COVID patients, the muscle fiber type in their muscles was switching from oxidative to glycolytic. The result was that these muscles were then easily fatigued. So there were many questions in that video that is it possible to reverse this? Can we switch the muscles back towards oxidative as well? So I have been collecting various studies and mechanisms to discuss this with you. Today we are going to discuss the following things. Number one, what are the muscle fiber types and the hybrid types? And number two, is it possible to switch them back? And that is a discussion that we'll do today. Anyone who has long COVID, muscle fatigues, post-exertional malaise, one phenotype, one pathophysiology could be the muscle fiber switching. Not all pathologies will mean that there is a muscle problem. There may be other problems. However, those who may have a muscle-related fiber switching problem, they would benefit from this talk. So let's start. And if you know someone who would benefit, please share that with them. So let's start. This is drbeen.com. Please get access to this. You have the link in the description. Just go to drbeen.com and see plans and get access. Hundreds and hundreds of beautiful CME lectures. And then this is the study that we discussed last week. Muscle abnormalities worsen after post-exertional malaise in long COVID. And then here are a number of studies that I want to go through today. So first, let me just show you a couple of diagrams of mine to set the stage for us. So in our muscles, imagine your muscle, let's say your biceps, your triceps, your muscles of the legs, etc. Our muscles have a proportion of various kind of fibers. We have slow oxidative fibers. Oxidative fibers mean they use mitochondria to do oxidative phosphorylation. They use oxygen to produce energy that their muscles use. These fibers are slow but enduring or powerful fibers. They move to a smaller distance. These are the kind of fibers that are present in your neck and in your back, and they keep your head held up the whole day and they do not tire. These are less fatigable fiber, but they are not rapid explosive fibers. On the other hand, there are glycolytic fibers which produce energy by doing anaerobic glycolysis. That is a process with which they can very quickly produce ATP. However, when they produce ATP very fast, they also produce a lot of waste products that can then cause the muscle fatigue to occur. And the study showed that the muscle fiber types were switching from oxidative, enduring, powerful muscle fibers to more glycolytic, fast, explosive, but quickly fatiguing muscle fibers. So here I have a diagram. So this is within the muscles. So imagine we have a muscle, let's say your biceps. Within the biceps, we have thousands and thousands of muscle cells, which are packaged into small membranes. So let's call those muscle cells as myocytes. Within the muscle cells, then we have contractile machinery, which is made up of multiple proteins, but important ones are actin and myosin, troponin, tropomyosin, etc. Here, what you're seeing in this diagram is one part of that contractile machinery that is sitting within a muscle cell. So this is a myosin filament. And if you see here, these tiny little hand and arm-like projections, these are the myosin proteins whose job is to connect with actin protein. And just like when you have your hand and you grab something and then you move your hand, that is what these fibers do. And the result is that they slide past each other and then they contract or they relax. Now, if you think about this little hand, this is very important. This myosin protein is very important. So here is a blown up or zoomed in structure of this. This protein has a tail So this is a tail. So let's forget about that. Tail has a hinge region, also not very interesting for us. Then it has a couple of light chains. These light chains, one of them is a regulatory light chain and the other one is the essential light chain. But what is more interesting is this heavy chain over here of this myosin head. Look at your hand. Imagine that this is that. On this heavy chain, there is a place where ATP, or the energy using enzyme, is present. We call it ATPase. ATPase mean an enzyme that will break down the ATP. So ATPase will pick up ATP and then break it down, and then that breakdown would allow this site over here on this protein, which is called actin binding site. So if you look at this side, this little head will bind with this thread, which is actin. So that binding site is over here. So how do the muscles work? They use energy produced in the muscle cell, ATP. They break it down here, and that broken down product, ADP plus phosphate, is then used to magnetize the myosin head, and it would connect with actin, and it would do a power stroke, and it would move. Then it would release. Then it would bind to another area, and it would do a power stroke, and this is how the muscles contract. This myosin is said to have multiple isoforms. Isoform means it has multiple types. There are some myosin heads that can move fast. There are some that can move slow. There are some that can move to a greater distance. There are some that can move to a shorter distance. There are some that can move to a greater angle. There are some that can move to a shorter angle. So the takeaway from this diagram is, within our muscle cell, there are myosin fibers. On the myosin fibers, just like a branch of a tree, on the myosin fibers, we have myosin heads, just like the leaves on a branch of a tree. These heads are of different types. They all use ATP. There is another part of the muscle construction, and that is, where does the ATP comes from? So we'll go to that part in a second. First, I hope that the takeaway from this slide is there are multiple kinds of isoforms of myosin. So why not I spill some beans over here? These isoforms can be changed on a muscle. So that's one. Let's continue to the next slide. In this slide, if you see here, there are some ninjas here and there are some turtles here. So the muscle myosin heads can be fast moving heads. I made them like this ninja over here. So these are fast glycolytic fibers with MHC2 isoform, or myosin heavy chain type 2. Over here, these are slow oxidative fibers. These are the ones that reduce in amount and in proportionality in the long COVID patients. So these are slow turtle fibers, but they are enduring, powerful fibers. They do not fatigue easily. These ninja fibers, the fast fiber, fast twitch fibers, they fatigue easily. These are glycolytic. Okay, now the next thing, this is really important. I had to collect this information from a lot of places, and then you just have it in this little diagram. Muscle fiber types can be type 1, for example, which is oxidative, slow twitch, powerful, enduring fibers. So if you see here, this one is a depiction of type 1 muscle fiber. And if you see here, it has all these turtle heads as myosin heads. And if you see here, it has a big mitochondria attached with it. Such muscles that, or such muscle cells that are type 1, that have 30% of their volume in mitochondria. 30% of the volume of a cell is mitochondria. It is filled with mitochondria. Why? Because it is a slow less fatigable, oxidative fiber. It uses oxygen, it uses oxidative phosphorylation, it uses mitochondria and oxygen to make ATP. In the long COVID patients, these fiber types reduce, they decrease. On the other hand, if you look at the extreme right side, this is another muscle fiber, muscle cell, that has myosines with these ninjas on it, with the fast heads on it. And so these are the type 2 fibers. And the type 2 has further breakdown, type 2A, type 2X, type 2B, etc. Type 2X in humans, type 2B in animals. If you see here, I made a lot of glucoses that are here. Why? Because this fiber, it is a rapidly moving fiber, it is an explosively working fiber, but it is quickly fatiguing fiber. And how does it make ATP? It makes that ATP using glucose. It breaks down glucose in anaerobic respiration. That produces ATP very quickly within a few steps of breakdown, but that produces more waste product as well. These fibers are fatigable but rapidly moving fibers. Then if you see here, so let's call this one, this is 2X. Then you see here, these are intermediate fiber types. These are the types that we are really interested in. These are also hybrid type. And there are many theories for why hybrid muscle fibers exist in our cells. And one theory that is more prevalent is that these fibers are necessary to provide us various speeds of movement. So imagine that this type 1 is slow, and imagine that this type 2X is fast. So that means if my biceps only has these two types, then either I would do slow movements or I'll do fast movements. But man, I want to do intermediate movements as well. So for allowing me to do those intermediate speed movements, I am given hybrid muscles. So in this hybrid muscle, for example, if you see, this is within one muscle cell, there are some myosin heads that are fast, and then there are some myosin heads that are slow. There are some myosin heads that are glycolytic, fast, and then there are some myosin heads that are oxidative, slow. And within one muscle, there is a composition of them. Here, this is another hybrid fiber, but if you see here, this one has more glycolytic rapid fiber myosin heads and less oxidative or slow fibers, slow heads. So if you see these two hybrids, you would see that they need glucose as well, and they need mitochondria as well. Their mitochondria volume is not as high as type 1. Type 1 was 30% mitochondria. Type 2 is only 5 to 10% mitochondria, and the hybrids are between 5 to 20, 30%. These fibers also need a lot of glycolysis work as well because they use glucose too. They are hybrid. So I hope this message is clear that one muscle cell can have myosins in it and can have various myosin isoforms, can have glycolytic and oxidative both in it. So now with these gears, multiple kinds of gears, our muscles can actually move at various speeds more smoothly instead of either very slow or very fast. Okay, so I hope this is clear as well. Myosin heads are of various types. Then their heads can be, if they're all of one type, we call it pure muscle fiber type. If there is a mixture of head types, then we call it hybrid. So here is a pure type 1 fiber. It is all oxidative, all oxidative fiber heads. On the other hand, this is also a pure fiber. It is type 2X, all glycolytic. And then here is a mixture. Good. I'm going to move to the next one. Now, here is the important thing to think with me. When we have muscle fibers, that are hybrid. So let's start from here. Let's say this is a glycolytic pure type 1 muscle fiber. That means its work, the myosine's work, is by using oxidative, the energy produced through oxidative phosphorylation or through mitochondria. So let me say that in this muscle cell, there are lots and lots of mitochondria. It is filled with mitochondria. Now, also notice that these muscle cells can actually have multiple nuclei in them. And our body has this kind of cells as well, where multiple cells can fuse with each other and have multiple nuclei in them. Or a cell can have multiple nuclei because one cell, for example, think about your muscle cell biceps, it starts on the shoulder and goes all the way to the elbow. That's a long muscle cell, and it would need a lot of activity within it, and it has to control those activities. So it may have multiple nuclei to act as command centers in various parts of the cell. This is a very important concept to capture. So imagine a fiber that goes from your hip joint all the way to your knee joint. In that muscle, it's a long fiber, and the muscles are very active systems. They cannot have one nucleus just present near the hip joint and that nucleus is controlling the whole fiber. So they may have many, many nuclei, many control units, many bosses sitting within one cell and controlling local territories. Imagine if it was a country, then these are little states within one cell, and there are heads of the states that are controlling that region. So here is a type 1 fiber, all filled with mitochondria with many nuclei. On the other hand, let's go to this one. Let's say this is a type 2X fiber, glycolytic fiber. There are no mitochondria over here. In reality, it has 5 to 10% mitochondria. So let's say not many mitochondria and lesser nuclei as well. And then here is the hybrid fiber. This is a very important concept, which I had to read to find it. A hybrid fiber has a problem for us to solve. And that problem is, how come some areas are working with glycolytic system and other areas are working with oxidative system within the same cell? And so there are many, many theories around that. I cannot go into those. That would become a PhD in musculoskeletal system. But generally, such muscle cells have zones in them. Those zones may have mitochondria. So in my diagram, the shaded areas, imagine they have mitochondria in them. So they would be producing ATP in this shaded area by oxidative phosphorylation. And that means these will be slow fibers, slow myosin heads here as well. On the other hand, this shaded area, or not shaded area, imagine that this has less mitochondria in here, and it is using more glycolysis because ATP is needed, because there are muscle myosin heads here as well that need to function. So what are they going to work with? The ATP produced with glycolysis. So this one muscle cell in this area is doing glycolysis, in this area is doing oxidation, maybe here glycolysis again, maybe here oxidation again. What a beautiful system we have. So with this physiology and mechanism in mind, I want to now show you some studies that show that muscle fibers can switch from one type to another. So what are you going to track now? Switching from what to what? We are looking for muscle fibers to switch from type 2 to type 1, type 2X to type 2A, or type 2A to 1. We are moving from glycolytic fast muscles to oxidative slow muscle. We are looking to have these muscles fibers more than these. And what is the pathology that has occurred in long COVID in some patients? That these have become more and these type 1 have become less. So now let's look at some studies. I'm going to go to this one, mixing it up, the biological significance of hybrid skeletal muscle fibers. So I have the full manuscript over here. This has a beautiful amount of data in here. But what I want to show you are some parts of it. So first of all, the prevalence of hybrid fibers. So they're discussing that, do we actually have the hybrid fibers? So here, hybrid fibers are common components of normal muscles. Although their prevalence varies hugely, various muscles of ours, biceps versus triceps versus glutes versus vastus lateralis, sartorius, many pectorals, they all have various densities of hybrid fiber. And there are many theories for why the hybrid fibers are. I just discussed one of them. So here, they comprise 0 to 100% of fibers in muscles examined thus far, and the precise proportion of hybrid fibers is highly dependent upon the specific muscle examined. Mean proportion of hybrid fiber is more than 25%. So if you focus on one of your muscles, imagine some muscle that is fatigued. Think about that one. In healthy state, about 25% of his fibers will be hybrid. And generally, it is divided 50-50 between slow fiber, oxidative, type 1, versus fast, glycolytic, fatigable fibers, or type 2. So then they've gone over various kind of animals and humans, and they've looked at that. Then it is hypothesized that the intermediate fiber types allow a muscle to achieve a greater range of contractile function. So I mentioned that instead of just either moving it slowly or moving it fast, the intermediate gears for the intermediate movements are given by hybrid fibers. Now there are classification parameters. I'm going to leave that. These links are in the description. Then role of hybrid fiber, we discussed that as well. Multiple speeds is one role, then transition from one type to another type. So here is an important sentence to catch. Sometimes hybrid fibers are present when one kind of fiber is transitioning to another kind of fiber. So imagine if I am a long COVID patient, I'm developing muscle fatigues, and the pathology is related to muscle fiber shift. Then my type 1 fibers will slowly start switching towards type 2A. That means they would start moving their oxidative myosin heads towards glycolytic myosin heads, or they would start moving from their slow heads towards fast heads. And in the transitional time, they will become hybrid. They would have both kind of heads, and then slowly they would continue to move towards the other side. If they can move to the other side, we can then try to move them back as well. Then they talk about development. During these development phenotypical transitions, hybrid fibers transiently co-express multiple MIC. So they're saying this is part when we are developing from little embryos to then children and then growing towards adults, our fibers keep transitioning from one type and to another type. That is fine. Then here, exercise. Exercise changes our muscle fiber types from one to the other. Depends what kind of exercise we are doing. Are we doing resistance exercises, or are we doing more sprinting exercises? More explosive sprinting exercises will move our fibers more towards the glycolytic fatigable fibers. And more slower movements, endurance movements, will move the fibers back from the type 2 towards type 1 that we want, oxidative fibers, less fatigable fibers. So if you see here, for example, 12 weeks of resistance training in previously untrained college-aged men and women results in significant reduction in number of hybrid fibers in the vastus lateralis. In both men and women, the reduction in hybrid fibers corresponds to a significant increase in pure type 2A fibers. Marathon training also reduces the proportion of hybrid fibers. So they can act as a pool as well. So then here, disuse. This is very important because the exact pathology or exact cause for why a long COVID patient has the muscle fiber type switching is not known. But there can be many reasons. One of the reasons is disuse. And disuse is, so imagine a patient who becomes long COVID. In the beginning, their muscles are actually fine, but they're slowly getting tired or fatigued. That causes the person to become more and more, less active, more and more. First, they walk less, they work less, then they start sitting more, then they start lying down more. And that disuse would start switching their muscle fibers from one to the other type. So here, disuse can take a range of forms, including simple inactivity, space flight, bed rest, spinal cord injury, and animal hibernation. And then they talk about, for example, in spinal cord transection, where it is cut, in rats elicits a dramatic shift towards hybrid fibers that is detected within a few days of injury, and this transition continues up to a year. Then if you see here, humans experience a global shift toward faster MHC isoform expression and dramatic increase in proportion of hybrid fibers after 35 years, 35 days, 84 days of bed rest, etc. Then check this out. In addition to the more common type 1, 2A, which in this study that said that 1, 2A were reducing, and type 2A, 2X, these are the fast ones but fatigable one. In this study had shown that these fibers had increased. Type 2A hybrid types, the study by Gallagher showed that bed rest also resulted in an increase in the proportion of fibers co-expressing all three isoforms. The point here is disuse changes the fiber types too. Exercise changes the fiber type too. So you must have a question in your mind, which fiber type, what should I do to start improving my fiber types? So according to these studies, slow movements like yoga, tai chi, qigong, that is the one. For example, let me just very quickly show you one study here. Effects of yoga on aerobic and anaerobic power of muscles. Aerobic power and anaerobic power were estimated in medical students before and after 6 weeks of yoga training. Remember, we are looking at a long COVID patient who has anaerobic fibers which are more and aerobic fibers that are less. A significant increase in aerobic power and a significant decrease in anaerobic power was observed. This may be due to a conversion of some of the fast twitch fibers, glycolytic fibers, fatigable fibers, to slow twitch fibers, which are better oxidative, less fatigable. Yoga. Okay, so back here. Aging does this as well. But I want to show you a couple of diagrams that are just so beautiful. Fiber type asymmetries, the hybrid fibers. Look at this diagram. Do you see this diagram? This is actually one muscle fiber. And if you see here, it is green over here and it is yellowish and different colors over here. Within one muscle fiber, they were labeling, they were tagging various kind of myosin isoforms, meaning glycolytic versus the other or fast or slow fibers, heads, and they colored them separately. And within one muscle fiber, they see zones of different forms of myosin heads. Look at this one. This is even more interesting. Let me see if I can make it bigger. Do you see that this is, imagine that this top fiber, type A, sorry, not type A, the diagram A, top fiber here, let's call that oxidative fiber. Then if you see below that is the red fiber, let's call that glycolytic fiber. So these are pure type. For example, this is type 1 fiber, this is type 2X fiber, the second one. The third one is very interesting. It starts red, which is glycolytic, but if you see here where there is arrow, over there it has become purple. It is a mixture of blue and red. It is a mixture of oxidative fiber heads and the glycolytic areas, or different isoforms of the myosin heads, and then it becomes blue. So there is a transitional time where there is a mixture, there is pure glycolytic, then there is a mixture, and then there is pure oxidative within one muscle cell. Then down here, if you see, this is another purple area. The point of this is, let me actually open this up one more time. I want to show you, I want to discuss a point I wanted to make. The point of this is, imagine that the top blue fiber is the oxidative, slow, less fatigable fiber. The second one, the red fiber, is glycolytic, more fatigable but explosively working fiber. According to that study, the red ones, the glycolytic one, easily fatigable one, increase, and the blue one, oxidative enduring fibers, reduce. The question is, can we move these back, the red ones back towards the blue? So yes, we can, but not strenuous exercises, because that would cause necrosis of the muscle, that would cause apoptosis of the muscle fibers, that would cause atrophy of the muscle fibers. Slow movements. Doesn't have to be the whole body starting to move. Maybe just some part of the body that starts moving slowly. Maybe arms, maybe legs, maybe hands, and then from there slowly working our way out. That is the key to success for such patients who have these pathologies. So then I want to go to this one. This is muscle fiber type transition with exercise, training, shifting perspective. So again, if you see here, current evidence using the most appropriate techniques suggests a clear ability of fibers to shift between hybrid and pure fibers, as well as between slow and fast fibers. So if you had to take away one message, what kind of fibers do we want more in the long COVID patients who have this pathology of muscle fiber density change? We want more slow, oxidative, less fatigable fibers. And what have we ended up with? We have ended up with fast, glycolytic, easily fatigable fibers. And you are seeing here. So if you read this one, they have a lot of various kind of exercises. For example, resistance and sprint causes a shift towards to produce more from 2x, etc. Then down here, this is interesting, endurance training. Endurance training generally induces a fiber type shift toward a more oxidative phenomena or phenotype, meaning oxidative type. Endurance training moves towards oxidative. That is what we want. So here, of course, these patients may not be able to do huge endurance trainings with dumbbells and etc. They should slowly start. Again, with your doctor's advice. This is not a medical advice. I'm presenting to you the studies that are light. It's a ray of light. Because I had been looking for this. That study has cleared up so many things that you can then build upon that and see what should be the protocol. This is why maybe the patients with lots of oxygen are not responding, because their muscles are actually not using oxygen. And they can respond to exercises. Now, the problem is they can't do much exercises. So they have to slowly move themselves out of it with their doctor's help. This is not a medical advice. So here, change in myosin heavy chain, mRNA, and protein expression in human skeletal muscle with age and endurance. In here, this was an interesting one. After training, myosin type 1 and 2A mRNA increased by 61 and 99%. Although they write that in more older individuals, moving the muscle fiber type becomes more difficult, but it is possible. Then exercise-induced mitochondrial biogenesis begins before the increase in muscle PGC1 alpha expression. This is a very important topic. So please, it's a slightly different topic from the previous discussion. What this topic is saying is that when we do exercises, the number of mitochondria increase in our muscle fibers, muscle cells. Now think about it. We want muscle cells that would use mitochondria's help to produce ATP, oxidative phosphorylation. So if you did exercises that cause more mitochondria, then naturally this muscle would start using ATP from mitochondria and oxidative phosphorylation would start happening. The muscle switching would start occurring. They have a lot more discussion about PGC1 alpha that is outside of the scope of this discussion. But here, exercise induces mitochondrial biogenesis production. Very important. So not only we are shifting the muscle fiber type, the shifting muscle fiber needs more mitochondria. Exercise automatically adds mitochondria as well. Then this is also recent perspective regarding the role of dietary protein. So proteins can be given as well so that the muscles can pick them up and build themselves. Effects of Qigong, exercise on muscle strength. Yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong. So here, regular exercise is associated with the production of small amount of oxidative stress, which might promote individual antioxidant capacity. And then therefore, the present study was aimed at evaluating effects of an 8-week Qigong exercise training on muscle strength. So they saw after 8 weeks of Qigong training, back and leg strength was significantly improved compared to baseline. Plasma oxidative stress levels were reduced and total antioxidant capacity was increased. And then I showed you this one. Yoga helped switch from faster to slower fibers, which we want. So, of course, I'm looking at a comment, red light therapy, mitochondrial help. We have discussed many other possibilities as well. And please keep in mind the pathology of fatigue. There are so many possibilities for why that can occur. Neurological issues can be there, autoimmune issues can be there, neuromuscular junction issues can be there, muscle fiber with autoimmune attack can be there, blood vessel issues can be there, the clotting can be the reason. There can be many reasons. So it is not that every single reason will be fixed with this. But as that study showed, all of the long COVID patients that were experiencing post-exertional malaise, they all had the muscle fiber proportionalities to be changing. So just for completion's sake, if I go to that study and if I look for fiber 2X, um, 2A by X. Okay, so I can't quickly find it, so that's my bad. But I had discussed it last time as well, that 1/2A were reducing, becoming rare, and 2A over 2X were increasing. Maybe I can search it. This is the last part and then we stop. If I search for rare word here. So rare, yeah, here, got it. The occurrence of more 2AX hybrid fibers and rare 1,2A hybrid fibers in patients with long COVID suggests that the pathophysiology of long COVID includes a fiber type shift towards a less oxidative, more glycolytic phenotype. So what I presented to you today is, if I was sharing my screen, you would be able to read it as well. The occurrence of more type 2AX hybrid fibers and rare 1,2A fibers in patients with long COVID suggests that the pathophysiology of long COVID includes a fiber type shift towards a less oxidative and more glycolytic. So I was reading here. And the various mechanisms that I showed you today, they show how to move back from there. So if I had long COVID, in the light of all of this research, that would mean slow exercises like yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong, or other slow exercises, but endurance exercises, not rapid movements. And as much as you can do, these are the ones that would start shifting the fiber type back. So this is the discussion. Thank you very much for listening in. And please like, subscribe, and share, support this work. If this work is good, if you like it, then share it with others too. There may be long COVID patients that would benefit from this. And if you would like to support us, the best support is you take a subscription on drbeen.com. Otherwise, you can become a member of Substack, Patreon, YouTube, etc. as well. Thank you very much, and I would see you again. Bye for now.